The night my husband threw me out for his mistress, he pointed at the door and laughed. "Take your belongings and leave." I quietly nodded and started packing. What he didn't know was that every piece of furniture, every appliance, and even the roof over his head legally belonged to me. By sunrise, his arrogance would turn into panic. "My name is Claire Bennett. And for 12 years, I thought I had a happy marriage." Looking back now, I realize that's what makes betrayal hurt so much. You don't see it coming. You spend years building a life with someone, trusting them with your dreams, your fears, and your future. Then one ordinary day, they become a stranger. And by the time you realize it, everything has already changed. At least that's what happened to me when I met Ethan Bennett. I was 28 years old and working as an interior designer. I wasn't rich. I wasn't glamorous. I was simply ambitious. I loved transforming empty spaces into beautiful homes. I worked hard, saved every dollar I could, and dreamed of one day opening my own design company. Ethan was charming, very charming. The kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel special. He remembered names. He told funny stories. He always knew exactly what to say. Back then, I thought I was lucky. My friends thought so too. "He's crazy about you," my best friend Megan used to say, and honestly, it seemed true. The first few years were wonderful. We rented a small apartment, we cooked together, watched movies on old furniture, talked about our future. When Ethan proposed, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. Before he even finished asking, I thought I had found my forever person. I was wrong, but the signs weren't obvious at first. That's the dangerous thing about people like Ethan. They don't change overnight. They change slowly. Slowly. You barely notice. After we got married, Ethan decided to start his own consulting business. I supported him completely. In fact, I became the primary source of income while he built his company. I worked longer hours, took on extra clients, sacrificed vacations, postponed personal goals, anything to help us succeed, and eventually, it worked. At least for me. My design business exploded. A luxury hotel project brought in several wealthy clients. Those clients referred more clients. Within a few years, I had built a thriving company. The income was far beyond anything I had imagined. Meanwhile, Ethan's business struggled, month after month, year after year, but I never complained. Marriage wasn't a competition, or at least I didn't think it was. I paid most of the bills. I purchased our home. I furnished it. I renovated it. I even helped Ethan pay off personal debts he'd accumulated before we met, yet somehow, he always acted like everything belonged to him. At first, I ignored it. Then I started noticing patterns. Whenever guests visited, Ethan loved taking credit. "This kitchen remodel was my idea. It took me months to redesign this space. I practically rebuilt the entire house." I'd smile politely, because arguing in front of guests felt petty, but deep down, it bothered me. Every tile, every cabinet, every design decision, every dollar, I had done all of it. Still, Ethan enjoyed pretending otherwise. Megan noticed too. One evening, after Ethan left the room during a dinner party, she leaned closer. "Does that bother you?" "What?" "The way he takes credit for everything." I shrugged. "It's not worth fighting over." She frowned. "I hope you're right." I laughed it off, but her words stayed with me. Years passed. The marriage became less affectionate, less connected, more distant. We stopped having long conversations, stopped laughing together, stopped acting like partners. Instead, we became roommates, sharing the same address. I told myself every marriage goes through difficult periods. I told myself things would improve. I told myself a lot of lies. Then, strange things started happening. Ethan became protective of his phone, extremely protective. If a text arrived, he'd immediately turn the screen away. If I entered a room unexpectedly, he'd lock it. Sometimes he'd smile at messages, the kind of smile he hadn't given me in years. At first, I ignored it. Then I started noticing late-night work meetings, weekend conferences, business trips. Everything suddenly required travel. One night, around midnight, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He was upstairs showering. I wasn't trying to snoop, honestly, but the screen lit up, and a message appeared. "Miss you already." My stomach dropped. The sender's name was simply a nothing else. No explanation. No context, just a heart, and suddenly every excuse, every late night, every secretive behavior clicked into place. I remember staring at the message, frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think. Part of me wanted to believe there was another explanation. There wasn't. Deep down, I already knew. When Ethan came downstairs, I confronted him immediately. Who's a? For a split second, panic flashed across his face, then it disappeared, replaced by irritation. A client. A client sends heart emojis. His jaw tightened. You're being ridiculous. I showed him the phone. His expression hardened. And that's when something changed. Not in him, in me. Because instead of apologizing, instead of explaining, instead of comforting me, he became angry. At me. You went through my phone? It was on the counter. That's still an invasion of privacy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you cheating on me? Silence. Just silence. And in that silence, I got my answer. Eventually, he grabbed the phone. I don't have time for this. Then he walked away. No denial. No reassurance. Nothing. I barely slept that night. The next morning, he acted as though nothing had happened, which somehow hurt even more. Over the following weeks, things deteriorated rapidly. The arguments became frequent. The tension became unbearable, and Ethan spent less and less time at home. Then came the moment that changed everything. A Thursday evening. One I will never forget. I arrived home earlier than expected. After a client meeting was canceled, the house was unusually quiet. At first, I thought Ethan wasn't home. Then I heard laughter upstairs, a woman's laughter. My heart started pounding. Slowly, I climbed the staircase, step by step, every instinct screaming that I didn't want to see what waited at the top, but I kept going, and then I reached our bedroom. The door was slightly open. I pushed it wider, and everything stopped. There she was, a woman I'd never seen before, standing in my bedroom, wearing one of my robes, holding a glass of wine, and sitting on my bed was my husband. Neither of them looked embarrassed. Neither of them looked guilty. In fact, Ethan looked annoyed. Though I was interrupting something, the woman glanced between us awkwardly, but Ethan simply sighed. You're home early. I stared at him, unable to process what I was seeing. What is this? The woman quickly set down her glass. Ethan, maybe I should go. No, he said. Then he looked directly at me and smiled, not kindly, not apologetically, coldly, like a man who had already made a decision, like a man who no longer cared what happened next. What he said next would destroy our marriage forever and reveal a side of him I had never truly seen. He stood from the bed, walked toward me, then pointed directly at the bedroom door, and with complete confidence, he said, Actually, Claire, you're the one who should leave. I stared at him in disbelief, certain I had heard wrong, but the smile on his face told me otherwise, and what he said next made my blood run cold. For a moment, I genuinely thought Ethan was joking, not because the situation was funny. There was nothing funny about finding another woman in my bedroom, wearing my robe, but because the alternative was too absurd to believe. I stood frozen in the doorway. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Yet, Ethan looked perfectly calm. As if this was the most normal conversation in the world. As if he hadn't just shattered 12 years of marriage. The woman shifted uncomfortably. She clearly wanted to disappear. Unfortunately for her, disappearing wasn't an option anymore. Excuse me? I finally managed. Ethan crossed his arms. You heard me. The arrogance in his voice stunned me. Not guilt, not shame, arrogance. Like a man convinced he'd already won. I looked around the room, my furniture, my artwork, my carefully designed space, everything suddenly felt unfamiliar. Then I looked back at him. You're bringing another woman into our home? Our home? Ethan laughed. The way he emphasized the word sent a chill through me. Our home? He repeated it again, then shook his head. Claire, let's stop pretending. The woman looked horrified, Apparently even she hadn't expected this level of cruelty. Ethan, stay out of it. Vanessa. So now I had a name. Vanessa. The mysterious A had a face, after all, and judging by her expression, she was beginning to realize she might not know Ethan as well as she thought. I folded my arms. What exactly are we pretending? Ethan smirked. That this marriage still works. There. It was. The speech. The one he'd probably rehearsed 100 times. The one he'd prepared while I was still fighting for us. I've been unhappy for years. I said nothing. I stayed because it was easier. Still, nothing. But things have changed. His eyes briefly shifted toward Vanessa, then back to me, and suddenly, everything became painfully clear. He wasn't just having an affair. He thought he'd found an upgrade, a replacement, someone newer, someone more exciting, someone who made him feel young again. The glitch was almost embarrassing. What are you saying? I asked quietly. I'm saying we're done. The words landed harder than I expected, not because I didn't see them coming, but because of how casually he said them. 12 years, reduced to 3 words. We're done. Vanessa looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ethan, maybe this isn't the right way. It is. He cut her off immediately. Then he pointed toward the hallway. Take your belongings and leave. For a second, I thought I misheard him. Leave? Tonight? I stared. Surely he couldn't be serious. But he was, completely serious. His confidence was almost impressive. Almost. Then he delivered the sentence that changed everything. This is my house now. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. The kind of laugh people make when reality becomes too ridiculous to process. Ethan's expression darkened. What's funny? You. His jaw tightened. I'm serious. I know. That irritated him even more. He took a step closer. You think I'm bluffing? No, then start packing. The room went silent. I studied his face carefully. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just confidence. This was certainty. The kind of certainty people have when they believe they're protected. When they think they've already secured victory. And that's when a thought crossed my mind. A very interesting thought. Had Ethan actually convinced himself this house belonged to him? The possibility seemed absurd. Yet judging by his behavior, that's exactly what had happened. Over the years, he'd told so many people the house was his, claimed so much credit, played the role of provider for so long. Maybe he'd started believing his own story. I suddenly felt calm, strangely calm, like the storm had finally passed, because, for the first time all evening, I realized something important. I wasn't trapped, Ethan was. He just didn't know it yet. So instead of arguing, instead of screaming, instead of crying, I smiled, a small smile. The smile confused him immediately. What? Nothing. Then why are you smiling? I shrugged. If you want me to take what's mine and leave, that's your choice. His expression relaxed. He thought he'd won. Vanessa looked confused. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because she was about to discover who she was dating, and that lesson would be expensive. Very expensive. Good, Ethan said. I'm glad we're finally being mature. Mature. The irony nearly killed me. I nodded. Absolutely. Then I turned around, walked downstairs, and left them standing there. The second I reached the kitchen, I pulled out my phone. Not to call a friend, not to call family. I called my attorney. David answered immediately. Claire, I need a favor. His tone changed instantly. What happened? My husband just threw me out of my own house. A pause. Then, your own house. Exactly. Another pause. Then David laughed. A long laugh, the kind lawyers usually try to suppress. I'm guessing he doesn't know. No, wow. I leaned against the counter. He brought his girlfriend into the bedroom. The laughter vanished. Are you serious? Very. David sighed. Okay. First things first. Are you safe? Yes. Good. I explained everything. Every detail, every word, every threat. When I finished, David was quiet. Then he said something that made me smile. Claire, your husband just made the biggest mistake of his life. I looked toward the staircase, toward the bedroom where Ethan was probably celebrating. He certainly thinks he's won. Not for long. No, not for long. David promised to handle everything first thing in the morning, legally, properly, completely. After ending the call, I made another one, this time to someone else, someone Ethan had completely forgotten about. My property manager. the man who handled several real estate investments I'd accumulated over the years, including this house. Mark speaking. Hi Mark, it's Claire. Claire, everything okay? Actually, I need a moving crew tomorrow. There was a pause. A moving crew? A large one? How large? I glanced around the kitchen. The custom cabinets, the imported appliances, the luxury furniture, the artwork, everything. Very large. Mark chuckled. Big project? You could say that. What exactly are we moving? I smiled. Everything. Silence. Then, everything? Every single item listed under my ownership records. Now he understood. Oh, yeah. Another pause. Then he laughed. How soon? Morning? I'll make it happen. After hanging up, I walked slowly through the house, room by room, looking at everything differently, not emotionally, legally. The dining table, mine. The couch, mine. The television, mine. The artwork, mine. The rugs, mine. The beds, mine. Even most of the dishes, mine. Years earlier, David had insisted I keep detailed purchase records for tax purposes. At the time, it seemed excessive. Now it felt brilliant, because every receipt existed, every invoice, every payment record, everything. And all of it pointed to one person, me. Around midnight, Ethan finally came downstairs, alone. Apparently, Vanessa had left. His confidence remained intact, still here. I looked up from my laptop. Technically, he smirked, you should start looking for apartments. I nearly laughed again. Instead, I closed the laptop. Don't worry about me. Oh, I'm not worried. Of course he wasn't. That was the problem. He wasn't worried at all. Yet, I stood, collected my purse, and headed toward the door. Ethan watched carefully, the smug expression never leaving his face. Finally accepted reality. I paused, then looked back. No, what does that mean? I smiled. It means tomorrow is going to be interesting. His eyebrows narrowed. What are you talking about? Good night, Ethan. And with that, I walked out, leaving him confused. For the first time all evening, the next morning began at exactly 7:02 a.m., with the sound of multiple trucks pulling into the driveway. Large trucks, several of them, and the moment Ethan stepped outside to see what was happening, his entire world started collapsing, because standing beside the lead truck was my attorney, and behind him were movers carrying clipboards, detailed inventory lists, and legal ownership documents. Ethan looked from them. To the trucks. To me. The confidence vanished instantly. What is this? David smiled professionally. Good morning. Ethan frowned. What is this? David handed him a folder. You requested that Mrs. Bennett remove her belongings from the property. Ethan opened it. His face turned pale, then paler, then completely white, because the first page contained a list, a very long list, and at the top in bold letters were 6 words he never expected to read. The realization hit him, slowly, painfully, but before he could even process the first page, one of the movers walked past him carrying something from the living room, and Ethan suddenly understood exactly what was about to happen. Ethan stared at the folder as if it were written in another language. His eyes moved across the pages, then back again, then back to me. The confidence he'd carried for months was gone, completely gone. What is this? He asked, his voice cracking. David adjusted his glasses. Ownership records. No, Ethan shook his head. This can't be right. Oh, it's right, David replied calmly. The movers continued walking past us. One carried an expensive leather chair, another carefully wheeled out a custom coffee table, a third carried a large framed artwork from the living room. Each item was checked against a printed inventory sheet, one by one, methodically, professionally, legally. Ethan looked horrified. You can't take that. The mover paused. Actually, sir, we can. He pointed to the paperwork. Item number 43. The mover continued walking. Ethan turned toward me. Claire, for the first time all morning, there was panic in his voice, real panic, the kind that appears when someone realizes they've made a catastrophic mistake. I simply stood there, quiet, watching. He opened the folder again, page after page, receipt after receipt, purchase record after purchase record. Everything led back to me. The furniture, the electronics, the appliances, the artwork, even the decorative pieces, because while Ethan had spent years pretending to be the provider, I'd been the one paying, every single time. His hands started trembling. This is insane. No, I said softly. What's insane is throwing someone out of a house you don't own. The words hit him hard, because now he finally understood. The house wasn't in his name. Never had been. Years earlier, when I'd purchased the property through one of my investment companies, Ethan hadn't cared enough to ask questions. He simply assumed. And over time, that assumption became certainty, a very expensive certainty. The front door opened again. More movers arrived. The living room began emptying quickly. The television disappeared. Then the entertainment center. Then the designer sofas. Then the dining set. Everything. Ethan watched helplessly, like someone witnessing a ship sinking beneath him. What am I supposed to do? The question almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because I'd spent years asking myself that exact question. Whenever his business lost money, whenever I paid another bill, whenever I sacrificed another dream to support him. What am I supposed to do? The difference was that nobody had rescued me. I rescued myself. David stepped forward. The divorce paperwork will be filed this afternoon. Ethan looked like he'd been punched. Divorce? I stared at him. You brought another woman into our bedroom. His mouth opened, then closed, because there was no defense. No explanation. No excuse. The truth was sitting right there, impossible to escape. Then something unexpected happened. He became angry. Again. Not ashamed, not apologetic, angry. You're seriously doing all this because of one mistake? I blinked. One mistake? 12 years, lies, cheating, humiliation, and he called it one mistake. David looked at me. I looked at David. Neither of us could believe what we'd just heard. Then Ethan continued, You don't destroy a marriage over one mistake. I took a deep breath. No, his face brightened slightly. For a second he thought I agreed. Then I finished. You destroy a marriage by making thousands of selfish choices that lead to that mistake. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the movers seemed impressed. Ethan looked away, because deep down, he knew I was right. The affair wasn't the cause. It was the result of years of disrespect, years of entitlement, years of taking someone for granted. The movers continued. By noon, most of the house was empty, and that's when Vanessa arrived. She pulled into the driveway and stepped out of her car. At first, she looked confused. Then she noticed the trucks, the furniture, the chaos, and finally Ethan, standing in the yard looking completely defeated. What happened? She asked. Nobody answered immediately. Then David handed her a copy of the ownership documents. 5 minutes later, she looked at Ethan differently, very differently, not with admiration, not with affection, with suspicion. Then realization. You told me this house was yours. Ethan said nothing. You said you built this life. Still nothing. You said Claire depended on you. The silence became unbearable, because every word exposed another lie. Vanessa slowly lowered the papers. You lied to me. I can explain. No, she shook her head. No. I think I understand perfectly. For the first time, I actually felt sorry for her. Not much, but a little, because she'd fallen for the same performance I'd fallen for years earlier. The charming smile, the confidence, the stories, the illusion. The difference was that she discovered the truth much faster than I did. She handed the papers back, then looked directly at Ethan. Don't call me again. And just like that, she left. Ethan watched her drive away. The expression on his face was almost surreal, because in less than 24 hours, he'd lost everything. His marriage, his affair, his reputation, his illusion of control, everything. But the story wasn't over yet, not even close, because the following weeks revealed secrets I never expected. As the divorce process moved forward, financial records were examined, business records were reviewed, bank statements were analyzed, and what we discovered shocked everyone, including Ethan. Apparently, his struggling business wasn't struggling because of bad luck. It was struggling because he'd been making reckless decisions for years. Secret loans, bad investments, credit card debt, financial risks he never told me about. The total amount was staggering. Millions of dollars, debt that could have destroyed us both. Fortunately, because I'd kept my finances separate and documented everything carefully, my attorney built a strong wall between my assets and his liabilities, a wall Ethan could not cross. The judge agreed. Every Records supported the same conclusion. The majority of our major assets belonged solely to me. Months later, the divorce was finalized, cleanly, legally, decisively, and for the first time in years. I felt free, truly free, not because I won, not because Ethan lost, but because I no longer carried the burden of someone who refused to value me. People often imagine revenge feels satisfying. The truth is different. Revenge burns hot and fades quickly. Freedom lasts much longer. 6 months after the divorce, I purchased a beautiful waterfront property, not because I needed a bigger house, because I wanted a fresh start, a place with no painful memories. No lies hidden in the walls. No betrayal lingering in empty rooms, just peace. One evening, while sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Megan visited. She handed me a glass of wine and smiled. You seem happy. I looked out over the water, the orange light dancing across the waves, the calm breeze, the quiet, and, for the first time in a very long time, I realized she was right. I was happy, not because my life was perfect, but because it finally belonged to me, completely. Megan laughed. You know what the funniest part is? What? Ethan spent years pretending everything was his. I smiled. Yeah, and in the end, she raised her glass. The only thing he actually owned was the consequences. We both laughed, because it was true, painfully true. A year later, my business expanded into 3 states, then 5, then nationally. The dreams I'd postponed for years finally became reality. Not because someone helped me, because I stopped letting someone hold me back. As for Ethan, the last thing I heard was that he moved into a small apartment and spent most of his time trying to repair relationships he'd destroyed. Whether he succeeded, I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. Some chapters aren't meant to be reread, they're meant to be closed, forever. Never confuse someone's confidence with their value. Some people take credit for what others build. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Some people believe loyalty means you'll stay, no matter how badly you're treated. But the truth always arrives, eventually, and when it does, titles, excuses, and arrogance disappear. What remains is character, because in the end, people don't lose their lives in a single moment. They lose them one selfish choice at a time, and sometimes, the person they underestimated is the very person who holds everything together.